Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. Ginny Weasley is one of the most underrated heroines in the Harry Potter saga. In the books, she receives much more narrative attention and screen time than in the films. Her journey, from the timid little sister to a brave young woman leading the resistance and winning the heart of the Chosen One, is undeniably impressive. And yet, the more closely you read her story, the more questions arise, questions that the books never fully answer. Today we're going to break down the strangest and most illogical moments surrounding Ginny Weasley. Enjoy watching. Number 1. How did Harry even end up marrying Ginny? Until the 6th book, fans were convinced that Harry and Hermione were the true endgame. They shared a deep friendship, mutual trust, and respect. But suddenly J.K. Rowling flips the narrative. Out of nowhere, Harry starts feeling something for Ginny, even though he had barely noticed her before. Ginny, on her end, had supposedly moved on from her childhood crush and dated other guys. And yet, it's like she was waiting for Harry to finally wake up. Their romance feels artificial. There was never any deep connection, and the leap from indifference to passion happened far too quickly. Number 2. How did Ginny escape punishment from the Death Eaters? When Hogwarts was overtaken by the Death Eaters, many students faced brutal consequences. Neville Longbottom and Luna Lovegood were covered in bruises and bore the visible scars of their resistance. Yet Ginny, one of the movement's leaders, looked fresh and untouched. Why? Was she spared? Or were other, subtler methods used on her? The logical inconsistency here raises quite a few eyebrows. Number 3. How did Ginny turn out perfectly fine after the Chamber of Secrets? Ginny's second year at Hogwarts was a nightmare. Tom Riddle's diary slowly drained her soul, forcing her to commit terrible acts. She lost control, blacked out, and was directly involved in the attacks. But once Harry killed the basilisk and destroyed the diary, Ginny just went back to life as normal. No depression, no post-traumatic stress, no visible guilt, as if everything had been erased with a magic wand. Doesn't that seem a little too convenient? Number 4. How did Ginny become the most popular girl in school? In her 6th year, Harry overhears Slytherin's he talking about how attractive Ginny is. For Harry, it's a surprise. For us, it's a shock. Up until that point, hardly anyone had paid attention to Ginny, aside from Michael Corner maybe. The Weasley family had a mixed reputation at school. The twins were pranksters, Ron was insecure, and Ginny suddenly became Hogwarts royalty. When and how did that transformation happen? The books never say. Number 5. Does Ginny have any flaws? Every main character in Harry Potter is complex and flawed. Hermione can be overbearing and too intense. Ron is lazy and jealous. Harry is impulsive, angry, and full of self-doubt. And Ginny? She's brave, smart, strong, beautiful, and respected. Even her rare bursts of anger are portrayed as charming. This overly idealized portrayal makes her feel less like a real person and more like a fan fiction character. Number 6. Where did Ginny learn the Bat Bogey Hex? In one scene, Ginny uses a very specific and rare spell, the Bat Bogey Hex. It's not a simple school trick. It's a powerful curse that unleashes a swarm of bats on the target. But where did she learn it? She wasn't taught it at Hogwarts. The books never mention her finding it in a spellbook or learning it from a mentor. So did she just pick it up on her own? That's a bit of a stretch for a lower year student. Number 7. What connected her to Michael Corner? Ginny's first relationship was with Michael Corner, a Ravenclaw. In Order of the Phoenix, we see them together, and everything looks fairly normal. But take a closer look, and they have nothing in common. Ginny is bold, direct, and full of fire. Michael is quiet, reserved, more of a bystander than a fighter. Aside from Quidditch, they don't share friends or interests. Their relationship doesn't feel like real chemistry, more like a narrative device to show that Ginny had grown up. Number 8. Why wasn't Ginny afraid of Harry after the chamber incident? Tom Riddle used Ginny's thoughts, fears, and secrets to control her. For nearly a year he whispered through ink, drained her energy, and made her doubt her sanity. When Harry found her in the Chamber of Secrets, she was half dead. Ginny was lying face down on the floor, Rowling wrote, her life almost gone. He saved her, killed the basilisk, destroyed the diary. But to Ginny he must have looked like a storm, wild, glowing, holding the fang that ended Riddle's soul. For a 12-year-old girl, that moment could have been terrifying. And yet in the next book, Ginny is smiling. She's laughing with Harry at the Burrow, sitting next to him at breakfast, acting like nothing ever happened. There's no trauma, no fear, not even a pause in her gaze. She doesn't flinch around the boy who saw her darkest secret, who held her lifeless body in a chamber full of bones and blood. Ginny never shows hesitation, never asks questions, never protects herself. That trust, immediate and unshaken, doesn't feel like healing. It feels like a scene we missed, a wound the story refused to show. Number 9. Why did Ginny forgive Percy so easily? When Percy walked out, the Weasley family shattered. Molly cried in silence. Arthur tried to stay calm. Fred and George called him a ministry puppet. Even Ron, torn between loyalty and pride, refused to speak to him. But Ginny, fierce, loyal, sharp-tongued Ginny, said nothing. The girl who hexed boys for mocking her friends and stormed into battle for Dumbledore's army had no words for the brother who chose power over family. No anger, no scenes, no slammed doors. It was as if his betrayal didn't touch her. In Deathly Hallows, Percy returns during the Battle of Hogwarts, apologizes and fights beside them. The twins embrace him. Ron forgives. George tries to smile. Ginny is there, but again, no words, no bitterness, no conflict. She accepts him instantly like nothing ever happened. "I'm sorry," Percy says, and it's done. For a girl who never shied from confrontation, her silence feels strange. Percy betrayed everything the Weasleys stood for, and Ginny, always the firebrand, offered no fire at all. Number 10. Why wasn't Ginny jealous of Hermione? In Deathly Hallows, Harry and Hermione disappear together for weeks. Ron leaves, tension boils, and the tent becomes silent. There's a scene where Harry and Hermione dance under the glow of a radio, clinging to each other in the dark. It's not romantic, but it is intimate. And still, when they return, Ginny says nothing. No questions, no doubts. She welcomes Harry back with the same quiet confidence, as if nothing had ever shaken her faith. But isn't that strange? Even Ron, Hermione's boyfriend, once accused them of being a bit too friendly. Ginny had known about their closeness for years. She saw them at the Burrow, in the common room, in battle. She watched them finish each other's thoughts. She heard Rita Skeeter's rumours in the Daily Prophet. And yet, never once did she express jealousy. Not during their hugs. Not during their whispered conversations. Not even when Hermione kissed Harry on the cheek and told him she loved him as a friend. It's almost too perfect, too mature for a teenage romance wrapped in war. For someone so fiery, so passionate, Ginny's silence is deafening. Real relationships include friction, jealousy, insecurity. But Ginny never flinches. She never questions Harry, not even when all the signs could easily be misunderstood. That level of calm might be admirable, but it also feels unnatural. Not because trust is unrealistic, but because Ginny's character was never written as someone who held back, and here, when emotion would have made her real, she stays, strangely, quiet. Number 11. Why did Ginny give up her Quidditch career for a quiet life? In Half-Blood Prince, Ginny flies like she was born for it. She zooms across the pitch as a chaser for Gryffindor, scores goal after goal, and ends the season a hero. Even Harry watches in awe. She's really good, he admits, stunned. Later we learn from Rowling's post-series notes that Ginny joins the Holyhead Harpies, one of the most competitive Quidditch teams in the league. It's a dream realized. The shy girl becomes a star, a firebolt in human form. Fans expected that fire to blaze for years. But then the dream ends, off the page. Ginny retires early and becomes a Quidditch correspondent for the Daily Prophet. The same Ginny who never backed down from a challenge now prefers press boxes to playing fields. The woman who once hexed boys for fun now writes columns and raises children. There's nothing wrong with choosing family. But this Ginny always chose both. She balanced danger and ambition, rebellion and tenderness. So why is her competitive spirit, so alive in her teens, extinguished so soon? We never see her struggle with the decision. Never read a line about injury, burnout, or regret. It just happens. The girl who lit up the sky with speed and fury fades into a quiet domestic life. Not even Harry, who spent years admiring her fire, comments on the change. No one does. Her career ends between the lines like an unfinished match. For a character built on courage and drive, this silent ending doesn't just feel sudden, it feels wrong. Number 12. Why didn't Ginny show any grief after Fred's death? Fred Weasley dies with a laugh on his face. The moment is brutal. The wall collapses, the dust settles, and Percy screams. Mrs. Weasley falls to the floor. Ron is frozen, devastated. But where is Ginny? She's not in that hallway. She's not with her mother. She's not even mentioned in the scene. Her grief, if it existed, happens off-page, lost in the chaos. And yet Fred was her brother, one of the twins who teased her, protected her, made her laugh. Her silence feels unnatural. Ginny grew up surrounded by Fred and George's mischief. She was their little sister, their audience, their favorite prank target. In Order of the Phoenix, she helps them test skiving snack boxes. In Half-Blood Prince, she defends their joke shop and even praises their courage for leaving Hogwarts. Her relationship with the twins was real, loud, affectionate. But after Fred's death, the girl who once shouted at Draco in the hallway and cursed Death Eaters during the Battle of the Department of Mysteries disappears into emotional shadow. In Deathly Hallows, the narrative skips past Ginny's mourning. We don't see her cry, we don't see her scream, we don't see her say Fred's name. The only thing we get is a vague sense that she's still standing. At the end of the book, she's next to Harry in the Great Hall, looking at the bodies, but even then, no reaction is described. Harry looks for Voldemort. Ron and Hermione hold each other. Ginny just exists. It's not resilience, it's erasure. A character with so much fire should have burned with grief, should have cursed the heavens or clung to her family, should have been shown kneeling by Fred's side, shaking with anger or sorrow. But Ginny Weasley's mourning is like a spell that was never cast. Not a tear, not a memory, not even a line. Fred's death changed the Weasleys forever, but the girl with a bat-bogey hex and a lion's heart was never allowed to show it. Number 13. Why did Ginny calmly let Harry go hunt Horcruxes without her? When Harry tells Ginny they can't be together, she doesn't argue. No shouting, no begging, no tears, just a quiet acceptance. "I never really gave up on you," she says in The Half-Blood Prince, moments before their final kiss. The war is beginning. Harry has just buried Dumbledore. And instead of clinging to him, Ginny lets go. It's noble, perhaps, but also strange. This is the same girl who hexed Zachariah Smith for insulting her friends, the same Ginny who snuck into the Department of Mysteries at 15. That girl didn't just sit back when danger came, she ran toward it. When the trio disappears to hunt Horcruxes, Ginny stays behind without protest. Not a single line in the Deathly Hallows suggests she asked to come, not even a whisper that she offered help. For someone as fiery and strong-willed as Ginny, that silence is deafening. She had known about the prophecy, she knew the stakes, she had dueled Death Eaters before. Yet she fades into the background when it mattered most. Rowling doesn't give her a scene to say goodbye. It all happens off-page, in quiet implications. During the same year, Luna Lovegood and Neville Longbottom start organising a full resistance inside Hogwarts. Ginny joins them. She breaks into Snape's office. She attempts to steal the sword of Gryffindor. These are brave acts, but they feel like compensation, like fragments of action given to a character who was once ready to follow Harry anywhere. Why didn't she insist on joining the mission itself? Why didn't she demand to be included in the fight that defined the fate of the world and of the boy she loved? The Ginny we knew would have pushed back, would have found a way, would have told Harry, "I'm coming whether you like it or not." But that never happened. She disappears from the central narrative as if her purpose was fulfilled the moment Harry kissed her. A girl who once seemed unstoppable quietly takes her place on the sidelines, and we're left wondering, was that her choice or the author's? Number 14. Why did Ginny change so drastically between Book 2 and Book 6? In the Chamber of Secrets, Ginny Weasley was a ghost in the background. Small, pale, and constantly blushing, she could barely speak in Harry's presence. Ginny seemed very prone to knocking things over whenever Harry entered a room, Rowling wrote, painting her as shy to the point of paralysis. She barely had a voice. Her only major moment in the book was tragic, possessed, manipulated, and nearly killed by Tom Riddle. The girl we met then was innocent, scared, and emotionally fragile. No one, not even her brothers, saw her as anything but the baby of the family. And yet, by the half-blood prince, Ginny walks into the Gryffindor common room and commands the space like a queen. She's witty, sarcastic, flirtatious. Boys trip over themselves to get her attention. Dean Thomas is proudly dating her. Even the ever-judgmental Slytherins call her hot. A moment so unexpected that Harry freezes in confusion. The same Ginny who once knocked over butter dishes now stuns entire hallways. But when did this transformation happen? We don't see her evolving gradually. It's as if she returned from summer break with a new personality stitched together overnight. There's a telling moment in Order of the Phoenix when Harry finally notices Ginny's presence in a different way. She's the one who boldly tells him, "Well, that's tough because I'm his sister and I'm staying put." This Ginny doesn't tremble. She defies. She joins Dumbledore's army, flies like a professional on a broom, and holds her own in battle, but there's no clear turning point, no mentorship, no internal struggle described in detail. For a series obsessed with coming-of-age arcs, Ginny's leap skips the actual coming-of-age part. It makes the change feel more like a rewrite than a development. It's as if Rowling, halfway through the series, realized Ginny needed to be worthy of Harry and restructured her accordingly. The timid girl from Book 2 simply vanished, replaced by someone who, while appealing, seemed to appear from thin air. Readers were left to fill in the blanks, but the lack of transition made the character's arc feel manufactured rather than earned. Number 15. Why wasn't Ginny a more active part of the main plot? Ginny Weasley had all the makings of a central figure in the war against Voldemort. Her defiance was born early in the shadows of Chamber of Secrets, where she was possessed by Tom Riddle's diary. This traumatic encounter should have cemented her as a key player, uniquely connected to Voldemort in a way no other student, save Harry, ever was. But instead of becoming a bridge between Harry and the deeper understanding of Voldemort's mind, Ginny was pushed back into the sidelines, her potential never fully explored. While Harry bore his scar, Ginny had a psychological scar of her own, but it was barely acknowledged in the broader arc of the series. The aftermath of her possession was mostly ignored, and her voice as a survivor was quieted instead of amplified. In the 5th book, Order of the Phoenix, Ginny was briefly given the opportunity to reclaim power through Dumbledore's army. She excelled in dueling and displayed a natural talent in offensive magic. She was the one who suggested the name for the group. Hermione might have initiated the idea, and Harry might have led it, but Ginny left her mark with that name, showing initiative and confidence. Yet even within the DA, she was rarely highlighted after that point. We are told she's skilled, especially with the Bat Bogey hex, but we aren't shown enough of it. Her contributions become whispers in the narrative, as if the camera keeps cutting away just before she does something great. Ginny's role during the events at the Department of Mysteries could have become a turning point. She fought alongside the core group, facing Death Eaters in the Hall of Prophecies, but in a moment that should have showcased her resilience, she is quickly injured with a broken ankle and removed from the main action. This abrupt sidelining feels almost symbolic of how her character is treated throughout the series. While Neville, Luna, and even Ron have visible arcs of struggle and triumph, Ginny is rendered quiet again, her pains swept aside without much commentary. It's a curious decision, considering she had more first-hand trauma from Voldemort than most of them. When Ginny entered her 6th year and Harry's 5th, she emerged as a confident young woman, capable on the Quidditch field and attracting admiration from boys throughout Hogwarts. But this transformation felt rushed, more informed than shown. Suddenly, Ginny was described as beautiful, talented and sought after, but where was the build-up? She kissed Dean Thomas, she laughed with friends, she played chaser brilliantly. Yet these glimpses into her personality are fragmented. Readers are told she's tough and independent, but rarely are we brought into her world. We don't hear her inner thoughts, her fears, her ambitions. She becomes an accessory to Harry's narrative arc, rather than a character with her own. In Half-Blood Prince, Ginny becomes Harry's romantic interest. Their relationship is painted with urgency and longing, but lacks depth. When Harry kisses her after a Quidditch win, the moment is electric, but it's built more on Harry's realization of her beauty and popularity than on any real emotional connection. Ginny, who had nursed a quiet love for Harry for years, is never given the space to process this development on the page. What did she feel when they first kissed? How did she react when Harry broke up with her for her own safety? Her voice is notably absent during this critical shift in both their lives. It's as if her emotional responses were deemed less important than the plot's need to move forward. When the final book arrives, Deathly Hallows, Ginny is left behind during the trio's Horcrux hunt. While understandable from a tactical perspective, this narrative choice also erases her agency. Instead of becoming an integral part of the Resistance, she becomes a name mentioned in passing. Yes, she helps restart Dumbledore's army. Yes, she's part of the Resistance inside Hogwarts, but the reader is kept at a distance. We hear of her actions but don't live through them. Her leadership role at school is implied but not shown in any significant way, robbing her of the opportunity to truly emerge as a general among students during dark times. In the Battle of Hogwarts, Ginny returns to the battlefield. She duels, she survives, she mourns Fred. And yet even here, the emotional weight of her presence is downplayed. When she insists on fighting despite being underage, she is initially barred from the front lines by Molly Weasley. Instead of seeing her argue, plot, or take risks, her decision to stay and fight is simply allowed off-screen. It's Neville who delivers speeches, Luna who provides direction, and McGonagall who commands strategy. Ginny is present, but the narrative lens never turns to her for long. Throughout the books, Ginny's strength is repeatedly stated but rarely explored. She's described as having a wicked sense of humor, as being fierce and brave. But these traits are like window dressing, used to support her role as Harry's love interest, rather than developed as part of a full character arc. Her friendship with Luna could have been fertile ground for emotional development. Her bond with Hermione is hardly explored. Her reactions to her brother's struggles and deaths are never centered. What did she feel during Fred's funeral? How did she cope with the knowledge that Percy nearly betrayed them? We never know. It's easy to imagine a different arc for Ginny, one where her trauma in the Chamber of Secrets becomes a catalyst for her to dedicate herself to fighting dark magic. She could have become the heart of the student resistance, a symbol of survival and growth. Her bond with Tom Riddle's diary could have provided insight into the nature of Horcruxes. She could have trained in secret, learned more about possession and memory charms, but the narrative never gave her that mission. Instead, her development plateaued. She peaked early, then remained static, a character of promise rather than impact. Number 16. Why did Ginny forgive Harry so quickly for breaking up with her? Ginny Weasley stood in the ruins of the Battle of Hogwarts, her face smeared with ash, her arms scratched, her breath trembling. She had just watched Fred die. She had just fought for her life. And yet, when Harry emerged from the forest alive, after all that time presumed dead, her first instinct was to run to him. There was no hesitation, no anger, no tears of betrayal, just acceptance, as though the months apart and the silent decisions made without her never existed. But this moment, so sweet and cinematic, hides a question that haunts the quiet corners of their love story. Why did Ginny Weasley forgive Harry Potter so easily? In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Ginny and Harry's relationship is brief but explosive. The build-up is electric, with Ginny maturing into a fierce, witty, and independent young woman who finally steps out from behind the label of Ron's sister. She becomes the Quidditch star, the confident voice in Dumbledore's army, the one who calls out injustice without hesitation. She kisses Harry in front of everyone, bold, unapologetic, entirely her own. But then Harry ends it. Not because he falls out of love, not because of some mutual decision, but because he believes he must sacrifice everything, including her, to protect her. "I can't be involved with you anymore," he tells her. "We've got to stop seeing each other. We can't be together." The finality is chilling. This was not a conversation. It was a declaration. Ginny did not get a vote. Her feelings, her will, her agency, none of it mattered in that moment. Harry, convinced he knew best, cut her out of his life in the name of noble self-sacrifice. But noble doesn't always mean kind, and in this case, Harry's choice cast Ginny into the role of someone too fragile to fight, too precious to participate, too weak to stand beside him in the darkness. And that assumption, however masked in love, should have hurt her. Deeply. Ginny Weasley had never been a damsel in distress. From the Chamber of Secrets, when she survived possession by Tom Riddle, to Order of the Phoenix, where she stunned Death Eaters alongside older members of the Order, Ginny constantly proved her strength. She duelled, she resisted, she persisted, and she did all of it without complaint, without expecting praise. So when Harry excluded her from his journey, assuming her safety outweighed her desire to fight, he was denying who she truly was. It wasn't protection, it was erasure. After Dumbledore's funeral, Ginny doesn't cry, she doesn't beg, she simply accepts Harry's choice and steps away, silent and composed. But silence is not absence of pain. What did Ginny feel watching Harry walk off into the shadows, knowing he was severing the bond they'd just formed? Did she cry alone, hidden from her brothers, aching with rejection, not just as a girlfriend, but as a warrior denied the right to stand beside the person she loved? The books never say, and maybe that silence is the most disturbing part of all. When they meet again at the Burrow, weeks later, Ginny doesn't confront him. There is no heated moment, no reckoning. She kisses him on his 17th birthday, and it is passionate but fleeting. "This is the last time I'll be seeing you for a while," she says, not angrily, but wistfully. "You're going off with Ron and Hermione, I understand." But why does she understand? Why does she let him go so gently when she has every reason to be furious, heartbroken, even bitter? There is a moment in Deathly Hallows that shows the cost of Harry's choice. At Bill and Fleur's wedding, Ginny dances alone. The spark is gone from her eyes. She watches as the world changes around her, while she is left behind. When the trio disappears and the war escalates, Ginny stays at Hogwarts, fighting the Carrows and protecting students. She becomes a leader, organizing resistance from the shadows. But none of this is shared with Harry. He hears of it only later, in pieces, like someone remembering a dream. Her bravery continues, but it happens in isolation, because Harry left her behind. And then, during the Battle of Hogwarts, Ginny returns to the spotlight. She is there, in the thick of it, dueling Bellatrix Lestrange, risking her life. When Harry appears again, miraculously alive, unscarred by her absence, she does not question him. She doesn't demand answers. She doesn't say, "Where were you?" or "Why did you decide for both of us?" She just looks at him with longing, with love, and when the dust settles, she becomes his future. This is the uncomfortable truth. Ginny forgives Harry without a fight. But should she have? She had every right to confront him, to make him feel the pain he caused, to say, "You thought I wasn't strong enough, you were wrong." But instead, she chooses silence, acceptance, a quiet return. And in doing so, her arc ends not as the fierce girl we knew, but as a woman moulded around Harry's choices. The books never show a true reckoning between them. No conversation where Harry admits that his decision to leave her behind was wrong. No apology, no moment of equal footing. The narrative moves on, assuming love makes everything whole, but love is not a bandage. It is a living thing, and it suffers when one person takes control. Harry, in trying to shield Ginny, wounded her autonomy, and she, in forgiving him without question, erased her own pain from the story. It is especially jarring when compared to other relationships in the series. Ron and Hermione clash, argue, demand explanations from each other. They grow through friction. Even Lupin and Tonks, however tragic, have a moment where Tonks stands her ground and refuses to be pushed away for her own good. But Ginny never gets that. She is not allowed to be angry. She simply loves him, and that love, though powerful, is portrayed as selfless to the point of silence. Number 17. Why didn't Ginny build a deeper relationship with Hermione? Of all the relationships woven into the fabric of the Harry Potter saga, the supposed friendship between Ginny Weasley and Hermione Granger remains one of the most underdeveloped and puzzling. Despite repeated assertions by J.K. Rowling and a few throwaway lines in the books, readers are left wondering whether this closeness truly existed beyond the surface. The silence between the lines tells a different story, one where two powerful female characters, seemingly bound to become sisters-in-law and close companions, never fully connect on the page or in the heart. Ginny, so often presented as fiery and bold, never seems to reach out to Hermione on any deeper emotional level. And Hermione, cerebral and fiercely loyal, never appears to lean on Ginny in her many times of need. If this was friendship, it was one that grew quietly in the shadows, never blossoming under the spotlight. From their very first interactions at the Burrow, the dynamic is surprisingly tepid. Hermione spends most of her time in conversation with Harry and Ron, occasionally helping Mrs. Weasley, but rarely engaging with Ginny in any meaningful way. One might expect that Ginny, the only girl in a household of brothers, would find a kindred spirit in Hermione. Yet their moments together are rare and often transactional. Even during Harry's 4th year, when emotions run high over the Triwizard Tournament and Hermione is battling the isolation of being disliked by much of the school, Ginny remains curiously absent. There is no scene where Ginny comforts Hermione or vice versa. We hear that they talk, but never truly see them sharing in each other's vulnerabilities. Ginny never seeks Hermione's support, even when dealing with the trauma of the Chamber of Secrets, and Hermione never offers a sisterly hand. There's a striking contrast in how Ginny interacts with others. Her flirtation with Michael Corner, her bold commentary among Dumbledore's army, and her sarcastic exchanges with her brothers all showcase a girl full of fire and opinion. But when it comes to Hermione, Ginny becomes muted. Perhaps Ginny saw Hermione as part of a world she didn't quite fit into. Hermione was Muggle-born, top of her class, and always mentally 3 steps ahead of everyone. Ginny, while clever and strong, was still a shadow in the earlier books, constantly observing but rarely asserting. herself with Hermione. Even when they were both part of the DA, there's no moment of quiet solidarity between them. No shared glance, no whispered strategy, no you and me against the world. For all their screen time, they remain curiously disconnected. When Hermione is tortured at Malfoy Manor, a pivotal, terrifying moment that leaves her scarred, it's Ron and Harry who respond with anguish. Ginny is not present, of course, but what's telling is that there is no follow-up scene where Ginny expresses concern or seeks to help Hermione recover emotionally. After such trauma, one might expect Ginny to act as a supportive friend or even a future sister-in-law. Instead, that role is filled more by Ron and Harry, with Ginny again standing at the periphery, even in the aftermath of the war. When families grieve and friendships deepen, there's no clear depiction of Ginny drawing closer to Hermione. If anything, Hermione seems to remain emotionally bonded to the boys. She and Ron argue, yes, but there is passion there. With Ginny, there is politeness, nothing more. Ginny's lack of effort to deepen her bond with Hermione is even more perplexing after she marries Harry. Hermione, who has been Harry's confidant and constant companion for years, should naturally become part of Ginny's inner circle. But readers are offered no such evolution. We are simply told in the epilogue that Ginny and Harry are married, that Ron and Hermione are as well, and that their children go to Hogwarts together. Yet these final glimpses reveal nothing of sisterly affection or deep emotional connection between the women. There's no indication that Ginny and Hermione ever learn to confide in each other or develop the sort of lifelong bond that their husbands clearly share. It feels like a missed opportunity, not just for their characters, but for readers who longed for a richer, more authentic female friendship. One wonders if Ginny was perhaps intimidated by Hermione's intellect or moral rigidity. Hermione could be overbearing and sharp-tongued, especially when challenged. Ginny, independent and hot-tempered in her own right, might have seen her as competition more than confidant. Their moments of alliance, like when they both criticize Fleur Delacour in Half-Blood Prince, are born more of shared annoyance than genuine closeness, and even that common ground vanishes. By the time Fleur proves herself during Bill's recovery, Ginny steps back, while Hermione re-evaluates her views. They don't compare notes, they don't laugh about their misjudgment. They simply drift again to separate corners of the story. What's equally noticeable is how easily Hermione forms deep friendships with others, especially with Harry. She cries for him, defends him, nurses him through injuries, and supports him through unspeakable loss. Her care for Ron is also vividly drawn, evolving slowly into romance but rooted in true emotional connection. But with Ginny, there's no such journey, no inner dialogue, no reference to late-night chats, no allusion to shared secrets. In Order of the Phoenix, when Ginny delivers the message to Harry about the DA meeting, it's done with efficiency, not intimacy. Hermione is the one orchestrating events. Ginny is a messenger. Their roles never overlap in a way that builds closeness. Number 18. Why didn't Ginny have her own personal storyline? In the vast tapestry of the Harry Potter universe, where characters are allowed to evolve, suffer, triumph, and reveal the depth of their souls, Ginny Weasley remains a strangely underdeveloped presence. Though her name appears throughout all 7 books, and though she is present at some of the most critical moments in the series, from the Chamber of Secrets to the Battle of Hogwarts, she never seems to claim a story of her own. Her appearances are brief, her dialogues often functional, and her role is repeatedly refracted through others, as a sister, a crush, a girlfriend, and eventually a wife. But never simply as Ginny. Harry Potter carries the weight of prophecy and loss. He struggles with his identity, his trauma, and the crushing pressure of being the chosen one. Ron Weasley battles jealousy, inferiority, and his place in a family where he often feels invisible. Hermione Granger grapples with her Muggle-born status, her pursuit of justice, and the cost of always being the smartest in the room. Neville Longbottom, the quiet boy with trembling hands, becomes a symbol of unexpected courage and resistance. Even side characters like Draco Malfoy receive nuanced arcs, internal conflicts, redemption, or downfall. But Ginny Weasley, despite being part of every major battle and despite her obvious bravery and talent, never emerges with a personal arc. That defines her. It is not as though Ginny lacks potential. In the Chamber of Secrets, she is central to the plot. Possessed by Tom Riddle, manipulated into opening the chamber, and nearly losing her life in the process. But that traumatic experience is never explored in depth afterwards. The second book ends, she survives, and the story moves on. There are no glimpses into her recovery, no discussions of guilt, fear, or growth. The diary that siphoned her life force is destroyed, but what of the girl who was its victim? J.K. Rowling chooses not to show us what happens in the aftermath. Ginny's pain is never treated as a turning point. By order of the Phoenix, Ginny has transformed. She is suddenly confident, athletic, witty. She joins Dumbledore's army, curses opponents with impressive precision, and becomes a talented chaser on the Gryffindor Quidditch team. But we never see how this change occurred. The reader is told that she is now formidable, but the journey that made her so is invisible. Unlike Neville, whose transformation from fumbling to fearless is shown through painful effort and small, incremental moments, Ginny seems to simply step into strength without struggle. It is hard to root for her when we don't witness the fire that forged her. There is a moment in Half-Blood Prince where Harry notices Ginny in a new light. He sees her laughing, hexing Zacharias Smith, flying with unmatched confidence, and suddenly he is captivated. But even this shift is described from Harry's perspective. It was hard to say what it was about her that was new and appealing, but he was beginning to suspect that he had never really known Ginny at all. The irony is, neither did the readers. We are told she is appealing. We are told she is powerful. But what we're never told is how she feels about any of it. Her perspective is locked away, her thoughts never voiced. Ginny's relationship with Harry is the most glaring example of her being used as a narrative accessory. She has been in love with him since childhood. This is her defining trait for much of the early series. In Half-Blood Prince, they begin dating, and then he ends the relationship for her own safety. She barely protests. In Deathly Hallows, they share a few moments, a kiss at the Burrow, a fleeting scene at Hogwarts. But their relationship has little emotional depth. Ginny's presence during Harry's inner battles is minimal. She does not challenge him, inspire him, or comfort him in any meaningful way. She is not a companion on his journey. She waits at the end of it. Other female characters are given full arcs, even if they are not in the spotlight. Luna Lovegood is deeply peculiar, but her philosophy and eccentricity are rooted in profound loss. The death of her mother. Fleur Delacour, often ridiculed for her beauty, becomes a loyal and fierce woman who helps care for the wounded and fights in the war. Even Bellatrix Lestrange, cruel and deranged, has a personality so strong that her every appearance crackles with intensity. But Ginny, who is brave, smart, and part of the Order, is never given that same narrative richness. She becomes important only because of who loves her, not because of what she does or chooses. In Deathly Hallows, Ginny fights in the final battle. She duels Bellatrix Lestrange. She helps protect Hogwarts. She loses Fred, but the reader never witnesses her grief, her rage, her fear. There is a line where she screams when Fred dies, and then silence. No follow-up, no breakdown, no moment where we are allowed to sit with her in sorrow. Her emotions are eclipsed by others. Mrs. Weasley's fury, Percy's remorse, George's emptiness. Ginny, again, is just a flicker at the edge of the storm. The epilogue seals her fate as a narrative afterthought. 19 years later, she is Harry's wife, a mother, and a sports journalist. That's it. No reflection on what the war did to her, no sign of who she became. Compare this to Harry, who is still burdened by his past but trying to create peace. Ron and Hermione, who balance family with ambition. Ginny's evolution is summed up by her marital status. The firecracker girl, who once hexed Draco Malfoy and led the Gryffindor team, is boxed into domestic normalcy with no visible emotional legacy. Why did J.K. Rowling leave Ginny so underwritten? Some argue it was because the books were told through Harry's eyes, and he simply did not notice her until later. But that excuse doesn't hold. We spend time in the thoughts of characters Harry isn't even close to, from Snape's anguished memories to Voldemort's obsessions. Rowling could have chosen to give Ginny space. She chose not to. Instead, Ginny was reduced to a symbol of home, of love, of what Harry might one day fight for, but she was never a person in her own right. There is a lost opportunity in Ginny Weasley, a character who could have embodied healing, defiance, and independence. What if we had seen her wrestle with the trauma of the diary? What if she had questioned Dumbledore's secrecy, challenged the Order's plans, or had a rivalry with another strong female character? What if she had a flaw to overcome, pride, fear, the need to prove herself? She could have carried a subplot of her own, a mission, a betrayal, a redemption, but instead she floats between scenes, untethered to any meaningful arc. Even fan interpretations and adaptations try to fill this void. In fan fiction, Ginny is often rewritten as a fierce strategist, a rebel leader, or a deeply broken girl hiding behind a mask of sarcasm. These portrayals arise from the hunger for more than what the books gave her. Readers saw the fragments of a compelling figure and imagined what could have been. They created the character Rowling never fully did. There is a brief but telling line in Order of the Phoenix, where Ginny says, "I've been possessed by the Dark Lord. You think I'm not used to this by now?" It's tossed out during a discussion of Harry's visions, almost as a joke. But within it lies a profound truth. Ginny was possessed by Voldemort. She did survive it, but the books never asked what that survival meant. That line could have been the gateway into a larger arc, a girl who carries darkness, who fears losing herself, who channels it into defiance, but it was never pursued. In the end, Ginny remains the girl with potential left on the cutting room floor. A spark that could have become a blaze. Her bravery is recorded, but not her burden. Her triumphs are mentioned, but not explored. She fights, she loves, she loses. But the reader never truly walks beside her. She is always just ahead or just behind, always someone else's something, never simply, completely, irrevocably Ginny, number 19. Why didn't Ginny tell anyone about Tom Riddle's diary? Ginny Weasley was only 11 years old when she came to Hogwarts for the first time. The youngest of 7 children and the only daughter in a family full of loud, confident boys, she arrived with a head full of dreams and a heart already taken by the legendary Harry Potter. She was shy, sweet, and quiet, often blushing furiously when Harry was near. But that first year at Hogwarts left a mark on her far darker than anyone could have predicted. The events surrounding the Chamber of Secrets were not just the product of magical misfortune, they were the shadow of manipulation, possession, and a silence that still lingers in the gaps of her story. Ginny's entanglement with Tom Riddle's diary was not a casual accident. She poured her soul into those pages, unknowingly feeding an echo of Lord Voldemort himself. As Tom grew stronger, she grew weaker, she lost time, she acted under his influence, she nearly died. And yet when the diary was destroyed and the dust settled, Ginny Weasley said almost nothing. Not to her brothers, not to Harry, not even to Dumbledore, who must have known something of what she endured. This silence is the puzzle, an uncomfortable question that refuses to disappear. After Harry destroys the diary using the basilisk fang, he rushes Ginny out of the chamber. She is pale and shaking, but conscious. She apologizes profusely for what happened, but that apology is vague, and Dumbledore, in a rare moment of leniency, allows her to go unpunished. He states in Chamber of Secrets, older and wiser wizards than you have been hoodwinked by Lord Voldemort. But that moment of comfort does not erase the fact that Ginny was used as a puppet in a nearly fatal series of attacks. Still, she chooses silence. She does not explain in detail how often she wrote in the diary what she shared, or how much of her soul was stolen in the process. What's especially unsettling is how easily the narrative moves on without asking her for a full account. Ron doesn't ask, Percy doesn't ask. Even Molly and Arthur Weasley, who nearly lost their only daughter, never seemed to demand an explanation. One could argue they were afraid of the trauma, afraid of asking questions that might reopen wounds. But trauma needs light to heal, and instead, Ginny's experience was quietly buried. Her silence begins to feel like a void, a haunting absence that casts a shadow over her later strength and confidence. The diary was not just a cursed object. It was a tool of possession, designed to test the durability of the human will. Ginny poured her heart into it, speaking of her fears, her loneliness, and perhaps her crush on Harry. In Chamber of Secrets, Riddle himself boasts, "I grew stronger and stronger on a diet of her deepest fears, her darkest secrets." This wasn't an object Ginny simply picked up and misplaced. It consumed her, it drained her, it tried to kill her. And yet, even in later years, she never shares those details with Harry. Not during their time at school, not in the lead-up to the Battle of Hogwarts, and seemingly not even as adults. This silence is especially striking when one remembers Harry's own openness about his experiences with Voldemort. He tells Dumbledore about his scar, the dreams, the connection he feels to Voldemort. He shares details with Ron and Hermione. He confesses his fears. Ginny, in contrast, walls off one of the most horrifying events of her life. It isn't strength, it's suppression. And suppression, as any healer would say, festers. What did she tell herself in those months after the diary was destroyed? That she was foolish? That no one would believe her? Or worse, that she was complicit? Her silence may have been born not from fear, but from shame. Ginny had been manipulated into helping the monster that petrified her fellow students. Though possessed, though unaware, she still opened the chamber. She still set the basilisk loose. That kind of guilt clings to the bones, even when logic says it's not your fault. And being 11 years old, Ginny might not have had the language to explain the psychic violation she endured. Worse, the wizarding world seems poorly equipped to deal with such things. There is no counselor, no healer offering trauma support at Hogwarts. No one guides her through what happened. Even Dumbledore, for all his wisdom, allows the event to drift into obscurity. He does not make it a teachable moment. He does not tell the other students what really happened, does not help Ginny face what she endured. Perhaps he thought he was protecting her. Perhaps he knew too well the weight of prophecy and fate and darkness to insist a child walk through her own nightmare in public. But this choice contributes to a culture of silence. And Ginny, like many victims of manipulation and control, internalizes that silence as a form of survival. In Order of the Phoenix, Ginny has become stronger, fiercer, and more vocal. She joins Dumbledore's army. She fights. She becomes the young woman many admire. But even then, the diary is never mentioned. When Harry shares with her that Voldemort can possess people, she simply answers, "You're not. He tried to possess me once, the diary, remember?" But she offers no further elaboration. It's a footnote in her past, buried under years of silence. For a moment, so defining, it seems strangely diminished. Was she afraid Harry would judge her? That he would see her as weak or even worse, as tainted by Voldemort's influence? Ginny, despite her confident exterior, may have carried that fear deep within. And it's possible Harry, always entangled in his own burdens, never truly asked. That silence becomes a fault line between them, an intimacy they never explore. Ginny loved Harry, but she did not confide in him about the single most horrifying experience of her childhood. What does that say about their emotional connection? Even in Half-Blood Prince, where Ginny begins dating Harry and their relationship blossoms, the trauma of the diary remains untouched. The irony is brutal. Harry spends that year obsessed with another magical diary, Snape's potions book. Without once recalling how diaries nearly killed the girl he loves, it's never discussed, never examined. A glaring silence between two people shaped by the same enemy. One wonders if the relationship might have deepened had they confronted that darkness together. There is also the unsettling reality that the diary was not just a weapon. It was the first known Horcrux Harry ever encountered. Its destruction was a major turning point in the war against Voldemort. And yet Ginny, the one person most intimately involved with the object, is not brought into the conversation when Harry, Ron, and Hermione begin hunting Horcruxes. Her insights could have been invaluable. She could have offered clues about its influence, about its pull. But no one asks, and she doesn't volunteer. The silence now feels institutional, not personal. Ginny's experience was erased not only by her own reluctance, but by the indifference of others. Her trauma became a secret and then a non-event. The fact that she recovered so well, became strong, became powerful, is admirable. But it also hides a dangerous lesson. That children can endure dark magic and simply move on. That healing is optional. That silence is strength. It's a message repeated too often in the wizarding world where battles leave scars and no one speaks of them. And what about the diary itself? That object, that cursed piece of Riddle's soul, is never studied. No one takes it apart. No one asks what Ginny wrote. No one documents the process of possession. It is destroyed and forgotten. But the damage it did to an 11-year-old girl, her lost innocence, her terror, her confusion, those things don't vanish with a blade. They linger, they change you. And Ginny, for all her bravery, never gets the space to talk about that change. Perhaps the most haunting part of Ginny's silence is that she seemed to believe no one would understand. That even among wizards, possession is taboo. That the sense of invasion, of violation, would be met with polite discomfort rather than empathy. She endured alone because the alternative felt worse. Judgment, pity, disbelief. And in a world where Voldemort was still only half remembered, she feared becoming a symbol of his return long before others were ready to see it. Ginny Weasley survived something terrifying, but survival isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning. And the fact that no one ever really asked her to tell it speaks volumes about the failures of those around her. She was silenced by fear, buried by guilt, ignored by systems that should have protected her. And in that silence we find not just a missing piece of Ginny's past, but a mirror to the way the wizarding world fails its children. Again and again. Number 20. Why didn't Ginny interact more with other Hogwarts students? Ginny Weasley entered Hogwarts with a dramatic flair, crying on platform 934, possessing a diary that nearly killed her, and forever attaching her name to the legend of the Chamber of Secrets. But after her survival and heroism, something strange happened. She faded into the background. The girl who had survived Tom Riddle's manipulation and a basilisk's threat quietly slipped from narrative prominence. As readers, we are told that Ginny becomes confident, witty, and admired, but we rarely see this unfold through her own relationships. Her social presence is almost entirely tied to the core trio and the men she dates. Her interactions beyond that, sparse and painfully underdeveloped. Throughout her Hogwarts years, Ginny is presented as likable and socially adept. Ron tells Harry in Half-Blood Prince she's got lots of friends, she's always talking about them. Yet none of these friends receive names, faces, or scenes of interaction, while Hermione has Parvati Patil and Lavender Brown to argue with, even if only superficially. Ginny's peers are invisible. We hear she's close with girls like Demelza Robbins or plays Quidditch with teammates like Katie Bell and Alicia Spinnet, but those scenes rarely involve meaningful exchanges. When Ginny does appear socially, she functions more like a satellite circling Harry's group, her independence only implied rather than portrayed. What makes Ginny's narrative arc more puzzling is the contrast between what we're told and what we're shown. In Order of the Phoenix, she is described as being the life and soul of the Gryffindor common room, but not once do we witness her leading a conversation, sharing secrets, laughing over a butterbeer with a close friend. Compare this with Seamus Finnegan or even Lavender Brown, secondary characters who still have small but vivid social lives. Ginny, however, appears like a sketch of a teenager. Where are her fallouts? Where are the moments of quiet bonding or clashing egos that characterize real friendships during adolescence? Even Luna Lovegood, who is far more socially isolated and marginalized, receives a fuller spectrum of relationships. Her outsider status is visible through teasing, discomfort, and eventual affection. She forms bonds with Neville and even Hermione, who initially dismisses her. Luna's social life, while limited, is textured. Ginny, though supposedly popular, has a strangely one-dimensional world. She isn't depicted gossiping in the common room, helping someone with homework, or sitting beside a close friend during a Care of Magical Creatures lesson. Instead, she drifts from Quidditch pitch to plotline, rarely anchoring herself in a believable circle of peers. Her romantic history offers the only real insight into her interactions beyond the trio. We know she dates Michael Corner and, later, Dean Thomas. But even these relationships are thinly sketched. Michael breaks up with her because Gryffindor defeats Ravenclaw in Quidditch, an odd reason unless their relationship was already surface deep. Dean's romance with her dissolves through a series of scenes where she complains about him helping her through doors. None of this explores the emotional layers behind teenage relationships. We never see Ginny feeling joy, heartache, confusion, or even attraction. Her romantic life, though mentioned, lacks psychological reality. This hollowness stands in contrast to how the series treats other female students. Cho Chang's romance with Harry is awkward and heartfelt, complete with grief, jealousy, and vulnerable missteps. Lavender Brown's infatuation with Ron, while comedic, gives her narrative agency. Even Pansy Parkinson, antagonistic as she is, exists with clarity in the Slytherin ecosystem. Ginny, however, floats in a narrative vacuum. Her closest canonical friend seems to be Hermione, who is a year older and more often cast as an older sister figure than a peer. We do not see Ginny confide in Hermione or argue with her. They simply coexist within the trio's gravitational field. One of the most revealing scenes comes in Half-Blood Prince, when Ginny calls Ron a prat after he criticizes her kissing Dean Thomas in public. Her retort, "Been kissing Pigwidgeon, have you? Or have you got a picture of Auntie Muriel tucked under your pillow?" is clever and shows confidence. But again, it's a performance for the boys. Ginny's few moments of sharp wit or bravery almost always occur in male-dominated spaces. She's a sister, a girlfriend, a teammate. Rarely is she simply a girl among girls, living the normal turbulence of teenage friendships. Perhaps the most poignant absence is that Ginny never has a female confidant. In a world as socially dynamic as Hogwarts, this is striking. Hermione has Harry and Ron, but also intermittent friendships with Parvati, Lavender, and even Ginny. Luna has her own rhythm of friendships, but Ginny, we are left to imagine that she whispers her secrets to the mirror rather than another girl in the dormitory. We do not see her paint her nails with a friend, debate love interests, or sneak off for midnight snacks. These might seem trivial, but they ground characters in reality. Without them, Ginny feels abstract. Her Quidditch success, while impressive, becomes her sole personality highlight. She makes the team in her 4th year and later replaces Harry as Seeker. But even here, her interactions are mostly functional. Angelina Johnson, Katie Bell, Alicia Spinett, older girls who might have mentored or bonded with her, are scarcely shown engaging with her on any level beyond the pitch. The Gryffindor Quidditch team is fertile ground for camaraderie, yet Ginny's relationships within it remain skeletal. We never see her celebrating a win with teammates or confiding about fears of failing a match. The moment when Ginny joins Dumbledore's army is another missed opportunity. She is described as a strong spellcaster, and we're told she becomes a key member. However, the DA's meetings rarely show her as a social force. She's not teaching others, forming inside jokes, or navigating disagreements. When Luna, Neville, and Ginny lead the DA in Harry's absence during Deathly Hallows, this would have been the perfect moment to spotlight her leadership and emotional bonds with others. But it happens off-page, told to us via summary, rather than shown with intimacy. Even her family dynamics reinforce this strange flatness. Ginny is the youngest and only girl in a large family. A setup ripe for storytelling becomes another ghostly detail. What are her private dynamics with her mother or Fleur? How does she navigate the loss of Bill's ear or Fred's death? Her grief in Deathly Hallows is almost entirely obscured, making her seem more like a background soldier than a full human being. Readers feel Harry's sorrow deeply. Fred's death cracks George open. But Ginny remains stoic or silent, her inner world a locked door. This narrative detachment feeds directly into her romance with Harry. In the books, their relationship blooms suddenly and then largely disappears. It was something out of someone else's life, Harry reflects when he kisses Ginny. The line is haunting because it underscores how little build-up their romance receives. They have minimal shared scenes, barely any emotional intimacy prior to their kiss, and even after their relationship starts, Ginny is mostly off-screen. We're told Harry is happier, but we're not shown why. What conversations do they have? What draws him to her besides beauty and bravery? Ginny's invisibility also impacts the reader's connection to her. We're meant to believe that Harry falls in love with her, that she's fierce and funny, that she becomes a powerful witch, but she is never allowed to be messy or contradictory. Her storyline is one of the few in the series that seems reverse-engineered to fit a romantic endgame. There's no arc of transformation, no breakdown, no rebuilding. She simply appears, matures, and arrives at Harry's side in the epilogue, as if always destined to do so. J.K. Rowling's decision to withhold Ginny's inner life feels like a missed narrative promise. A girl who survives possession by Voldemort and becomes a warrior in the Resistance should be layered, flawed, and visible. Instead, Ginny moves like a ghost through Hogwarts, brushing past classmates who remain unnamed, unspoken to, and untouched by her presence. Her bravery and humor deserve scenes, her friendships deserve names, and her voice deserves space, because without them, Ginny becomes not a person, but a placeholder in someone else's story. Number 21. Why does Ginny never seem to feel fear? In the swirling chaos of the Department of Mysteries, when death was inches from their faces and shadows whispered through the hallways, Ginny Weasley's voice never trembled. Her ankle was broken. She was younger than everyone in the room except maybe for Luna. Yet she clenched her wand and stood her ground. While Ron whimpered under the power of the brain tentacles and Neville lost half his spells to a shattered nose, Ginny stayed upright. But where was her fear? Not panic, not worry, not hesitation, true bone-deep fear, the kind that even the bravest characters showed when the end was near. Harry showed it in the graveyard when Voldemort rose again. Hermione broke down in tears before her parents forgot her forever. But Ginny, not once, not even a flinch. It was the same pattern, repeated again and again. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, when Death Eaters infiltrated Hogwarts and chaos reigned, Ginny wasn't just present. She was at the front lines. The castle was burning, students screamed, and spells lit up the corridors like lightning across a battlefield. Harry's heart was pounding. He feared for Dumbledore, for his friends, for the school. But Ginny was calm, collected, ready to fight. Ginny was hurling hexes down the corridor, at a Death Eater who had just burst through a tapestry. That line from the book paints her as the warrior girl, the rebel flame. But why isn't there even a flicker of fear in her portrayal? She's 16, she should be trembling somewhere under a desk. She isn't. When Fred dies, her brother, her blood, her childhood partner in pranks, Ginny doesn't collapse like Percy. She doesn't scream like Mrs. Weasley or go into shock like George. Instead, we are told later that Ginny was kneeling beside Fred, quiet, solemn, composed. The scene focuses more on Ron's anguish and George's devastation, but the reader is left wondering, what did Ginny feel? Where is her pain, her helplessness, her terror? Grief doesn't erase fear. If anything, it magnifies it. Ginny has just seen what war truly costs. She should be shaking, but she isn't. Even back in her second year, Ginny was possessed by Tom Riddle's diary. She wrote in blood on walls. She lost her sense of self, her memory. That alone is a violation more terrifying than any curse. When she wakes up in the Chamber of Secrets, she's sobbing in Harry's arms, but that's the only moment she seems truly broken. By the next book, she's laughing with friends, trying out for the Quidditch team, and flirting with boys. That may be resilience, or it may be J.K. Rowling choosing not to explore the trauma. Other characters evolve through their pain. Harry's nightmares, Neville's stammer, Lupin's hesitation, but Ginny simply becomes stronger. Too strong, perhaps. The lack of fear becomes more unsettling when placed next to the fear of others. Take Neville Longbottom. He's scared stiff in his early years at Hogwarts, afraid of Snape, afraid of failing, afraid of disappointing his grandmother. But his arc is powerful because we see him overcome those fears. His moment of bravery in Deathly Hallows, drawing the sword of Gryffindor and beheading Nagini, is earned through years of struggle. With Ginny, there's no arc. She's already fearless, already capable, already unshaken. But fear is not weakness, it's humanity. Even Hermione Granger, the sharpest mind at Hogwarts, is terrified of failure. Her boggart is Professor McGonagall telling her she failed all her exams. She fears losing control. She fears losing Harry and Ron. She fears the world turning upside down and not being able to fix it. And when Bellatrix Lestrange tortures her in Malfoy Manor, Hermione breaks. Screams echo in that cold, dark place. Her terror feels real, raw. Ginny is absent from this moment, but one wonders how she would have reacted. Would she have clenched her jaw and waited? Or would she have finally cracked? Even in romance, Ginny never shows fear, not of vulnerability, not of rejection. She kisses Harry with a confidence that Hermione lacks. She doesn't hesitate to date other boys, doesn't hesitate to confront Harry when he pulls away. When Harry breaks up with her for her safety, Ginny simply replies, "It's for some stupid noble reason, isn't it?" There's no heartbreak, no tearful scene, only sarcasm and pride. Her love is passionate but never fragile. Her pride is her shield. But a character who never fears heartbreak is one who never truly risks love. What is love without the fear of loss? During the Battle of Hogwarts, as people died around her, Ginny volunteered to fight. She was underage. She could have stayed in the room of requirement, protected by enchantments, surrounded by friends. But she didn't. Her choice to fight is admirable. But again, there's no mention of trembling hands, of racing thoughts, of fear. Even Harry, who had faced death so many times, felt fear before walking into the forbidden forest. He was not afraid. It was curious how that went, the book says. But it's precisely because he had known fear that this calm felt earned. Ginny never has that evolution. She is simply brave from the beginning. The absence of fear in Ginny's character robs her of depth. Not because fear makes someone weak, but because fear makes someone real. Luna Lovegood, as eccentric and dreamy as she is, shows subtle fear when she's imprisoned at Malfoy Manor. Her voice is quieter, her posture more guarded. She never whines, never panics, but we sense her unease. That's why Luna feels layered, mysterious, unpredictable. Ginny, in contrast, becomes a symbol more than a person, a flame-haired fighter girl, always ready, never cracking, a Gryffindor ideal. Even Draco Malfoy, raised in privilege and arrogance, breaks down under pressure. When ordered to kill Dumbledore, his wand shakes. He sobs in the bathroom. He fears for his family. That moment in the astronomy tower makes him more than a bully. It makes him a boy trapped between darkness and expectations. His fear is the beginning of his redemption. But what about Ginny? If she ever broke, the story didn't tell us. And because of that, we don't know what it took for her to remain strong. Fear isn't always loud. It doesn't have to be expressed in screams or tears. Sometimes it's a silent tremor, a hesitation before a duel, a look of doubt in a confident face. But Ginny has none of that. She's always certain, always poised. Even her mother, fierce and powerful, trembles before battle. "Not my daughter, you bitch," is a battle cry born of terror and fury. Ginny never gets such a moment. Her heroism is quiet, yes, but it's also too smooth, too untested. Fear, after all, is the fire through which courage is forged. The absence of fear also separates Ginny from the trio. Ron, who hides behind humour, is terrified of spiders, of inadequacy, of being overshadowed. Harry is afraid of losing those he loves. Hermione is afraid of failure. These fears make their bond stronger. They understand each other's weaknesses and love each other anyway. Ginny, however, stands apart. She's a warrior, not a companion, a symbol, not a friend. She enters their circle, but she's never really in it. Perhaps that's why readers struggle to connect with her. There's one moment that could have changed everything. After the Battle of Hogwarts, in the aftermath, when silence falls and corpses lie on the floor, the book tells us Ginny is seen holding her mother, mourning Fred. That should have been her moment of collapse, her moment of humanity. But the narrative quickly shifts to Harry. He's the one who walks among the dead. He's the one who faces the trauma. Ginny is background. She fades into the scenery of grief, not because she has no grief, but because the story never lets her show fear. In the epilogue, Ginny stands with Harry, confident and composed, sending their children off to Hogwarts. The war is over, the world is healed, but we're left with a character who survived without ever visibly bleeding. She lost friends, she lost family, she was possessed, nearly killed, fought in 2 major battles, but not once did she tremble. Not once did her voice falter. And that, more than anything, is what makes Ginny Weasley such an uncomfortable question. Not her strength, but her silence. Number 22. Why didn't Ginny ever try to talk to Cho Chang? In the echoing halls of Hogwarts, where whispers travel faster than owlpost, relationships are rarely simple. When it came to Harry Potter, the boy who lived under more scrutiny than anyone else in the wizarding world, every gaze and gesture was magnified. So when Cho Chang, the popular Ravenclaw seeker, and Ginny Weasley, the fiery youngest Weasley child, both found themselves connected to Harry, something unspoken began to shape between them. Yet what's striking is the silence. Not the kind that comes from peace, but the kind that suggests avoidance. Ginny never spoke to Cho about Harry, never sought understanding, and never seemed to acknowledge that Cho had once been where she now stood. This silence was never addressed in the books, but it lingers. Cho Chang's relationship with Harry was brief, but emotionally charged. She was Harry's first crush, his first kiss, and perhaps the first person with whom he shared the burden of Cedric Diggory's death. After Cedric's murder during the Triwizard Tournament, Cho clung to Harry like a lifeline to grief. But Ginny, who had observed all of this, never showed even the faintest sign of empathy. Cho wasn't merely a romantic footnote. She was a girl in mourning, someone who'd lost her boyfriend in the most horrific way possible. Still, Ginny, who by all accounts was growing into a confident and mature young woman, never reached out, not once. It is not uncommon for teenage girls to drift apart or avoid one another when they share history with the same boy. But in Hogwarts, a confined world where students grow up together, live together, fight together, it's difficult to believe that Ginny never had an opportunity. Or was it more accurate to say she never wanted one? Cho is slowly erased from the narrative by the time Half-Blood Prince begins, while Ginny takes her place beside Harry without any visible emotional complexity. It was as if Cho had never existed and Harry had never kissed anyone before Ginny. This convenient disappearance is suspiciously tidy for a series that so often deals with the messiness of feelings and loyalty. There is a particular moment in Order of the Phoenix that remains unsettling. After a disastrous Valentine's Day date, Harry returns to the Gryffindor common room where Ginny and Hermione are waiting. Hermione explains that Cho had been jealous of Harry's friendship with Hermione and that the argument spiraled from there. Ginny's only contribution is a smirk, telling Harry that Cho sounds a bit pathetic. This line, while easily dismissed as teenage bluntness, reveals something deeper. Ginny, who had once been the girl crying over Harry from behind her butterbeer, was now confidently judging the girl Harry had kissed. That moment should have been a turning point, an opportunity to show kindness, perhaps to express solidarity. Instead, Ginny mocked a girl whose heart had already been broken twice, first by Cedric's death and then by Harry's emotional detachment. The absence of a conversation between Ginny and Cho is deafening. It is not about jealousy or rivalry. It is about narrative empathy, something J.K. Rowling bestowed generously on many characters but withheld here. Even characters like Snape, with all his moral ambiguity, were eventually allowed to show shades of regret and humanity. But Ginny was never made to reflect on Cho. She never wondered aloud what it was like to be the girl who loved Harry before her. Never apologized for the harsh judgment, never showed that she understood how fragile grief can make someone. And yet Ginny was allowed to mature unchallenged, her relationship with Harry. Painted as ideal, unburdened by history, it's easy to forget that Ginny and Cho had similar roles on the Quidditch pitch. Both were seekers, both were strong flyers, both had presence and popularity. But Ginny is given the arc of the victorious. She becomes the girl who wins the war and the boy. Cho, by contrast, is portrayed as someone who crumbled under pressure. Even the DA, which Cho joined at great personal risk, ends up casting her aside. When her friend Marietta Edgecombe betrays the group to Umbridge, Cho is held accountable by proximity. Ginny, who helped form the DA, never extends a hand to Cho afterwards. She never asks what it was like to watch her friend make that mistake, or what it cost her to stand on Dumbledore's side. Perhaps Ginny didn't need closure because she had already moved on in her mind. She had grown from the shy girl who once blushed at Harry's presence into a woman of action. She had other things to worry about, the Order, her family, the war. But even in war, kindness matters, understanding matters. Harry, for all his flaws, tried to find peace with people who had hurt him, even Draco Malfoy in the final book. Why didn't Ginny extend the same courtesy to Cho? Was it pride? Was it resentment? Or was it the fear that acknowledging Cho meant confronting the idea that Harry's heart had not always belonged to her? In The Half-Blood Prince, Ginny is suddenly everywhere in Harry's thoughts. He watches her with Dean Thomas and feels jealousy bloom. Their eventual kiss in the common room is electric, symbolic of a love finally realized. But there is no pause, no moment of reflection on the girl he had once held close beneath the mistletoe in Madame Puttifoot's tea shop. Ginny never wonders aloud what it means to inherit a love once given to another. That silence is not just hers. It belongs to the narrative, which refuses to complicate her victory. It strips away the emotional baggage and delivers Ginny as the final answer, the unchallenged winner of Harry's affection. Even after the war, when the world has changed and so many have died, there is no mention of Cho, not even in passing. Ginny becomes Harry's wife. She bears his children. She is a Quidditch reporter and a mother. But in a story so concerned with cycles and legacies, the choice to erase a chapter of Harry's emotional past, and for Ginny to participate in that erasure, feels like a betrayal of emotional honesty. It suggests that Cho was never important, but she was. She mattered to Harry and to the story. It could be argued that Ginny had no obligation to reach out, that not all wounds require confrontation, but that argument falters in the context of Hogwarts, where nearly every character's arc is built on resolution, whether through redemption, sacrifice, or reconciliation. Neville finds strength, Draco faces truth, Snape reveals his heart. Even Dudley Dursley, the symbol of early cruelty, is given a chance to show gratitude, but Ginny never has to acknowledge that her rise coincided with someone else's fall. She was allowed to be the hero's girl without questioning how that role was won. There is a passage in Order of the Phoenix where Hermione tells Harry, "She's feeling very confused and guilty and worried. That's how girls tend to feel when they fancy someone and don't know how to make it clear." Hermione was talking about Cho, but the line could just as easily apply to Ginny during her early years at Hogwarts. The difference is that Cho's confusion is seen as weakness, while Ginny's early fumbling is forgiven as youth. One is mocked, the other matured. One disappears, the other triumphs. The disparity is not just about storytelling, it's about the messages we receive about which emotions are valid and which are inconvenient. Had there been a scene, even a quiet one, in which Ginny simply asked Cho how she was, or expressed gratitude for the role Cho once played in Harry's life, it would have changed everything. It would have made Ginny not just the brave and brilliant woman Harry loved, but someone capable of deep emotional integrity. Instead, we are left with a portrait of Ginny as self-assured but detached, a woman who claims the future without acknowledging the past. Ginny is not heartless, far from it. She fights for justice, defies danger, loves fiercely. But her silence toward Cho speaks volumes. It says that in her world, some stories are better forgotten, some girls are better left behind, and perhaps that is the most uncomfortable truth of all, that the girl who was once ignored by Harry became the woman who ignored someone else, and no one, not even J.K. Rowling, made her answer for it. Number 23. Why did Ginny never question Harry? Ginny Weasley stood in the background for far too long. She watched, she listened. She survived a dark possession by Tom Riddle at 11 and walked away, hardened, stronger than most girls her age. She was a warrior in her own right, a survivor of trauma few truly understood. Yet through all the battles, betrayals, doubts, and deaths that accompanied Harry Potter's story, Ginny remained unwaveringly loyal to him. Not a single moment of suspicion, not one scene where she challenged his judgment or questioned his increasingly reckless path. That silence, the blind support, raises one deeply uncomfortable question. Why? Ron Weasley, Harry's best friend, walked out on him in the middle of their quest to destroy Horcruxes. It was during the Deathly Hallows when the locket's influence amplified his insecurities and jealousy. "You think I don't know how this feels?" he snapped, angry and hurt. "You have no family." It was brutal and honest. Ron doubted Harry, not just once, but repeatedly. It didn't make him a worse friend, it made him human. Hermione Granger, the moral compass of their trio, was often skeptical of Harry's instincts. She questioned his obsession with Draco Malfoy in The Half-Blood Prince and pushed back against his growing arrogance and reliance on gut feelings. Even Albus Dumbledore, the man who once said Harry possessed a power the Dark Lord knows not, kept secrets from him, manipulated his path, and showed hesitance about revealing the full truth until it was almost too late. Yet Ginny Weasley never raised her voice. She never questioned Harry's choices, no matter how dangerous, impulsive, or poorly explained they were. In the Order of the Phoenix, when most of the wizarding world believed Harry was delusional about Voldemort's return, Ginny was simply there. No confrontation, no inner turmoil, no scene where she wondered whether Harry had lost his grip. She offered emotional solidarity without asking for proof. A Gryffindor through and through, but isn't courage also about speaking uncomfortable truths to those you love? Ginny's strength was established early on. In the Order of the Phoenix, she was the only one who stood up to Harry's frustration and reminded him, with steel in her voice, that she too had been possessed by Voldemort. That moment of confrontation was rare and powerful, but after they started dating in The Half-Blood Prince, her character began to blend into a perfect image of the ideal partner. No longer did she offer challenges, no longer did she object. Ginny Weasley became the girl who waited, who smiled supportively, who kissed him in front of the Gryffindor common room and let him walk into the night to destroy evil without a single real conversation. In the Deathly Hallows, Ginny appears mostly in the periphery. She returns briefly for Bill and Fleur's wedding, sends Harry a birthday kiss, and then becomes a shadow figure in the chaos of war. Harry doesn't confide in her about the Horcruxes. She doesn't ask. There's no request for truth, no demand for inclusion. Ginny simply trusts. For a girl who grew up in a large, emotionally loud household, who fought at the Department of Mysteries, who took part in Dumbledore's army with fire and rebellion in her heart, this silence is deafening. It's as if she chose to mute herself when it came to Harry. When Harry returns to Hogwarts in the final battle, Ginny is already there, ready to fight. She is fierce, brave, capable, but again, no scene is given where she asks the one question others dared to whisper, "What is your plan, Harry?" McGonagall, Kingsley and Lupin all voiced concerns or demanded answers. Not Ginny. Even as chaos spread, even as her family faced death, she stayed silent. Her loyalty never wavered. But should it have? Would it not have been more compelling, more believable, if she had a moment of doubt, of fear? It's especially troubling when viewed against her character's foundation. In the Chamber of Secrets, she was victimized by Voldemort's diary, lured into his influence because of her vulnerability and isolation. That experience should have made her sensitive to the dangers of blind faith. She, of all people, had reason to fear manipulation, to worry about power unchecked. But instead of caution, she offered trust. Instead of inquiry, she gave her heart. The trauma of her possession never resurfaced in later books. No conversations, no emotional unpacking. She was simply fine. And in being fine, she became dramatically less real. One must also consider the emotional asymmetry in their relationship. Harry doubts himself constantly. He obsesses over what he should or shouldn't do, whether he's leading people into danger, whether he's doing the right thing. Ginny, on the other hand, acts as though there is never any reason to second-guess him. This creates a peculiar imbalance. He's allowed to be flawed, insecure, human. She is not. She is ideal, supportive, static. Fictional in the worst way. A character defined more by her proximity to the hero than by her own growth. Perhaps the clearest example of this is when Harry breaks up with Ginny at Dumbledore's funeral in The Half-Blood Prince. "It's for some stupid, noble reason, isn't it?" she says softly. She doesn't fight him. She doesn't try to change his mind. She accepts it with quiet understanding. And yet that moment could have been a turning point, an opportunity to show the depth of their bond, to force Harry to confront the reality of cutting someone out for their own safety. But instead, Ginny becomes one more person Harry says goodbye to. Her voice is gentle, forgiving, predictable. Her silence isn't just puzzling, it's damaging. In a series that prides itself on characters who grow through conflict, Ginny is an outlier. She doesn't clash with Harry, she doesn't challenge him. Their relationship lacks the emotional tension that makes other bonds in the series so memorable. Think of Sirius and Harry, or Harry and Snape, or even Harry and Luna. Each of those connections includes friction, complexity, emotional weight. With Ginny, it's almost always smooth, easy, convenient, but love, real love, is rarely that clean. Theory aims. Some might argue that Ginny's loyalty is her strength. That, in contrast to Ron's jealousy or Hermione's rational skepticism, Ginny offered what Harry needed most, faith. But blind faith, especially in war, can be as dangerous as betrayal. Harry made mistakes. He trusted the wrong people. He acted on instinct when patience was needed. A real partner would have pressed him, not out of disloyalty, but out of love. To ask, "Are you sure?" is not a betrayal. It is a gift, a way of sharing the burden. But Ginny never asked. Even in the Deathly Hallows, when the stakes were highest, Ginny's faith remained pure. She fought bravely, yes, she risked everything, but she still did not claim a seat at the table of strategy or doubt. After Fred's death, after Harry's apparent sacrifice in the forest, Ginny doesn't demand answers. She mourns, she waits, her voice never rises above the noise, and when Harry returns from the forest, triumphant and scarred, she doesn't ask what happened, she embraces. The story gives us a kiss, a reunion, but not a reckoning. That's not how deep love works. Deep love sees flaws. Deep love questions. It rebels. Ginny never truly rebelled against Harry, not once, not even when she had reason to, not even when he hurt her. This lack of conflict drains their relationship of realism. It turns Ginny into a romantic accessory rather than a full-fledged character. She deserved better. So did the readers. Harry and Ginny's romance ends with domestic bliss in the epilogue. They are married, they have children, they are happy, but how much of that relationship was earned on page? How many meaningful conversations did we witness? How many private doubts were shared? Ginny loved Harry, that's never in question, but love without questions is not strength, it's silence. In the end, Ginny Weasley's loyalty may have been meant as a symbol of strength, but it reads as a silence too perfect to believe, and silence, when it replaces emotional honesty, does not make a relationship deeper, it makes it shallower. Ginny deserved to ask Harry a difficult question. Readers deserved to see what would happen if she did. Number 24, why was Ginny never injured playing Quidditch? In Half-Blood Prince, the Hogwarts Quidditch pitch once again becomes a crucible of pressure, ambition, and bruised egos. Among the players is Ginny Weasley, a girl whose confidence with a broomstick rivals, and in some moments exceeds, that of her older brothers. She soars with precision, dodges bludgers like a seasoned chaser, and even seizes the snitch in a match against Hufflepuff. Her role on the Gryffindor team becomes not just functional, but pivotal. And yet, in the storm of splinters, twisted wrists, and broom-induced chaos that defines Quidditch, she remains untouched. Not a broken bone, not a single visit to Madame Pomfrey for broom-related injuries. For readers familiar with the physical toll this sport takes, Ginny's flawless track record feels strangely unnatural. It is not a matter of doubting her skills. Ginny's ability to fly is well established. In Order of the Phoenix, it is Ginny who ultimately replaces Harry as Seeker when Professor Umbridge bans him. She's been breaking into the broom shed since the age of 6, Ron once mentions, implying that her flying talent developed in secret and under self-taught discipline. She demonstrates audacity, control, and clarity during matches. But talent doesn't grant immunity. Even the most agile Seeker, Victor Crumb, suffered a broken nose and bloodied mouth during the Quidditch World Cup. And Harry himself was repeatedly knocked unconscious, poisoned, hexed, or paralyzed mid-game. With bludgers flying and rival players showing no mercy, why does Ginny escape without a scratch? One could argue that Ginny's position might keep her safer. She plays both Seeker and Chaser depending on the match. However, both roles expose a player to different but equally dangerous threats. Chasers are often the targets of multiple bludgers, particularly when controlling the quaffle. Seekers are usually pursued by other Seekers or even beaters, desperate to prevent a snitch capture. When Harry was Seeker, Draco Malfoy infamously used foul tactics to shove him off course, and in one match Dobby even hexed a bludger to follow Harry relentlessly, breaking his arm. Ginny, however, never seems to endure such targeted aggression. Her opponents never play dirty, bludgers never find her, and teammates never collide with her. Her games are exciting but oddly sanitized. The inconsistency becomes more glaring when considering the injuries of her teammates. Ron suffers a cracked rib during his first match. Katie Bell is nearly killed by a cursed necklace, though off the pitch, and Jimmy Peakes and Richie Coote, introduced as new beaters, are described as enthusiastic but erratic, accidentally whacking bludgers too close to home. During one chaotic match, Peakes even hits a bludger toward Harry's head, leading to a crash and a stay in the hospital wing. Even Hermione, who never plays Quidditch, sustains injuries from various magical accidents throughout the series. Ginny, meanwhile, becomes an invisible exception to the rule, not by charm or enchantment, but seemingly by narrative design. The physics of Quidditch are brutal. In Chamber of Secrets, Harry's arm is shattered by a rogue bludger, and in Prisoner of Azkaban he is knocked from his broom by a swarm of Dementors. These events are vividly described. He was falling through the icy air, not knowing which way was up or down, Rowling writes. The sense of chaos, of limbs flailing, of the broom escaping control, these are universal consequences of the sport. Quidditch is a game that punishes hubris, inexperience, and even skill. Yet Ginny emerges from every game with wind-swept hair and a triumphant smile. Where is the bruising? Where are the cracked kneecaps or the torn robes? This peculiar immunity raises another question. Could it be that Ginny was simply too important to injure? By Half-Blood Prince, her narrative significance has shifted. She is no longer the shy girl who wrote in a diary. She has transformed into a confident, flirtatious, fiercely independent young woman. Her relationship with Harry begins to smolder in the background of the story. As a romantic interest, Ginny needed to be strong, impressive, and unbreakable. Perhaps Rowling, consciously or not, protected her from the messy realism of Quidditch injuries to preserve her image. It would be hard to paint her as Harry's equal if she were also hobbling on crutches or sipping Skelligro after every match. Still, this approach contrasts with how other strong female characters were treated. Hermione, the brightest witch of her age, spends a good portion of Chamber of Secrets petrified. She ends up in the hospital wing multiple times across the series, hexed, cursed, or hit with jinxes. Even Tonks, a skilled aura, is shown to be fallible and physically affected by her missions. Ginny, meanwhile, floats through danger with an elegance that borders on implausible. During the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, she breaks her ankle. But that's a rare moment, and even then it's resolved quickly. For someone so often in the thick of chaos, she remains unusually whole. There is also the issue of Quidditch's narrative purpose. For Harry, it is an outlet, a place where he feels in control. His victories are hard-earned and his failures stinging. The pain, both emotional and physical, is part of his journey. For Ron, Quidditch is a symbol of insecurity. His every mistake is amplified by his fear of judgment. But for Ginny, Quidditch is a plot convenience, a way to demonstrate her competence without revealing too much. The lack of injuries might not reflect her skill, but rather the lack of narrative space given to her failures. Her arc doesn't include vulnerability, it is compressed into strength. This also affects reader perception. Ginny becomes an ideal more than a person. Without fear, failure, or physical consequence, she loses the relatability that defines other characters. Even Harry's worst enemies, Malfoy for example, are shown limping, wounded, or embarrassed. Ginny's flawless trajectory makes her seem detached from the dangerous world around her. It's as if she exists in a protective bubble where Quidditch is intense but painless, romance is fiery but uncomplicated, and battles are fought but never lost too dearly. Some fans have speculated that Ginny's injury-free record is due to magical protection, perhaps subconscious or inherited. After all, Molly Weasley is a powerful witch, Could she have charmed Ginny's broom to shield her? It's an interesting theory, but unsupported by canon. Others suggest that Ginny is simply luckier than most. But Quidditch is not a game of luck. It is fast, cruel, and violent. To escape it unscathed repeatedly stretches the boundaries of believability. What makes this question uncomfortable is that it pokes at the veneer of invincibility the narrative wraps around Ginny. We are asked to believe in her as a fierce warrior, a loyal sister, and a romantic partner, but we are not shown the costs. Every heroic character in the series bears scars, literal and emotional. Neville's clumsiness masks his trauma. Luna's aloofness conceals her grief. But Ginny, especially in Half-Blood Prince, is a figure of sleek perfection. Her broom always obeys, her bludgers always miss, and her landings are always clean. She becomes not a player, but a symbol of narrative convenience. This does a disservice to the character. If Ginny had been shown crawling out of a crash, bloodied but defiant, readers might have connected more deeply with her. If she had broken a rib, screamed in pain, and kept flying, like Harry or Ron, we might have respected her more. Instead, her invulnerability creates distance. She does not grow through pain. She simply appears already forged, already polished, and already beyond risk. And in a world where growth is so often linked to suffering, her immunity becomes a narrative flaw. Even in the final book, Deathly Hallows, where stakes are higher than ever, Ginny's path remains mostly clean. She is removed from the battle by her mother. She fights, yes, but off-page. She survives, of course. And though she loses Fred, a grief that should be soul-breaking, her inner world is rarely explored. She is strong, silent, and again unbroken. It is as if the story never dared to scar her, afraid of cracking the image it so carefully constructed. Readers are left to ask, what would Ginny have become if she had suffered more, if she had fallen once, not metaphorically, but from her broom onto the pitch, splintering bone and pride? Would she have fought harder, loved deeper, feared more? We do not know, because in the brutal, bruising world of Quidditch, Ginny Weasley never bleeds. And that, in a series defined by pain and sacrifice, is its own kind of discomfort. Number 25. Why didn't Ginny continue to clash with Fleur after the wedding? In the heart of Half-Blood Prince, the Burrow is alive with tension not only because of the war outside its walls, but also because of something more domestic, the arrival of Fleur Delacour. From the moment she enters the Weasley household, she radiates confidence, beauty, and elegance. But none of that seems to soften the disdainful glares she receives from Molly Weasley or the biting sarcasm from Ginny. Fleur, with her silvery hair and thick French accent, is painted as an outsider, a disruption, even a threat to the quiet traditions of the Weasley home. Ginny, normally direct and emotionally expressive, immediately takes the lead in mocking Fleur, going so far as to call her phlegm behind her back. It's childish, yes, but it's also consistent with Ginny's fiery personality. And yet, when Bill lies injured by Fenrir Greyback and Fleur pledges her loyalty to him, the entire family does a narrative about face. Molly's heart softens. The wedding is planned, but Ginny? She disappears. For a character so vocal, so stubborn, so fiercely loyal to her family, Ginny's silence in the second half of the story is deafening. One might expect at least a grudging acceptance or a forced smile. But we don't get anything. In fact, Ginny's entire emotional arc toward Fleur is abruptly cut short, never to be revisited. She doesn't apologize, doesn't reconcile, doesn't even make a snide remark at the wedding. The girl who used to roll her eyes and mimic Fleur's accent is suddenly nowhere to be found in this subplot. Why? The contrast is stark. In Half-Blood Prince, Chapter 5, Fleur is described as speaking in a throaty voice that immediately annoys Molly and Ginny alike. Ginny doesn't hide her disdain. Her mockery is casual but cutting, emblematic of a teenager who knows she's being cruel and doesn't care. She even jokes about Fleur's behavior with Hermione, forming a tight little alliance of judgment. Ginny's language is saturated with contempt, and she finds Fleur vain, condescending, and unbearable. The nickname Phlegm isn't just a joke, it's an expression of how physically repulsive Fleur's presence feels to her. And then comes the hospital wing scene, when Bill is mutilated and Molly is panicking. Fleur, standing firm and proud, declares, "I am good-looking enough for both of us, I think." This moment is intended to redeem Fleur, to reveal her depth, to show the Weasleys she is more than her appearance. Molly is moved. Even Hermione seems impressed. But Ginny, the girl who was most vocal in opposing the relationship? Not a word. It's as though her previous bitterness was erased, as if the emotional impact of Fleur's declaration didn't require any acknowledgement from her. It's not just out of character, it's suspiciously convenient. Ginny's characterization throughout the series hinges on her boldness. She is the girl who hexes Draco Malfoy in the corridor, the girl who shouts at Ron when he slut-shames her for dating, the girl who gets detention for standing up to authority. She's not one to quietly swallow her emotions, she wears them like a badge. And yet here, she fades into the background, offering neither resistance nor reconciliation. The absence is jarring because it's not what Ginny would do. She would push back, or at least comment. But J.K. Rowling gives her nothing. One theory suggests that Ginny's silence was not character-driven but plot-driven. By the time Bill and Fleur are preparing to marry, the focus of the story shifts toward the Horcrux hunt and Dumbledore's death. There's no space for petty family drama. The wedding becomes a narrative device, a place for Harry to meet Doge, for the trio to plan their escape, for chaos to erupt. Ginny, once a central voice of opposition, becomes set dressing. She's present but not participating. The problem is, this feels like a betrayal of the emotional truth that had been established. Readers notice. The lack of closure between Ginny and Fleur stands out because every other Weasley is given a moment to turn. Molly embraces Fleur. Arthur shows support. Even Percy, the estranged brother, makes a clumsy appearance. But Ginny, whose hatred was the loudest, gets no arc, no moment of growth, no acknowledgement that perhaps she was wrong. It's as if the story is too eager to move on. The wedding itself, described in Deathly Hallows, is rich with detail. The flowers, the music, the guests. It's a rare moment of celebration in a dark book. Fleur is radiant and everyone admires her. But Ginny, she barely appears. She is mentioned only once, in passing, when Harry notes she looks very pretty in gold. That's it. The girl who coined phlegm vanishes into the crowd. There is no meaningful interaction between her and Fleur, no sign of resolution, no wink to the reader that the ice has thawed. The omission is deafening. What makes this more uncomfortable is that Ginny's behavior toward Fleur is never held accountable. She mocked someone who turned out to be brave, loyal, and kind. She misjudged her entirely. But the story doesn't force her to confront that mistake. For a series that often emphasizes the importance of understanding, of second chances, of learning from misjudgments, think of Harry and Snape, Ron and Kreacher, Hermione and the House Elves, this lack of reflection feels like a breach of its own moral code. It's also troubling in the context of Ginny's feminism. She is a strong female character, unafraid to speak her mind, to challenge authority, to define herself beyond male validation. But her treatment of Fleur is tinged with jealousy, insecurity, and cattiness. It undermines her strength by reducing her to a stereotype, the mean girl who hates the pretty one, and without any growth, Ginny's mockery becomes less a moment of immaturity and more a permanent stain. Some fans argue that Ginny likely made peace with Fleur off-page, that perhaps, like Molly, she was moved by Fleur's declaration in the hospital, that maybe between the lines a silent understanding passed between them. But fiction isn't real life. It needs to show the change. Characters require visible evolution. Otherwise, readers are left guessing, and guessing is not storytelling. The dissonance becomes sharper when we contrast Ginny's attitude toward Fleur with her later role as a sister-in-law and mother. In the epilogue, she is portrayed as a grown woman, happily married, presumably mature, but the seeds of that maturity are never planted when it comes to Fleur. There is no bridge between the teenager sneering phlegm and the adult sitting beside Fleur at Christmas dinner. The transformation is assumed, not earned. What's also interesting is how Fleur reacts, or doesn't react, to the hostility. She never confronts Ginny, never demands respect, never retaliates. Her strength lies in her indifference, a refusal to stoop to Ginny's level. This in turn makes Ginny's behaviour look even worse. The more composed Fleur is, the more immature Ginny seems. It creates an imbalance that begs for resolution and never gets it. Ginny's silence after the hospital wing scene is also uncharacteristically passive. She usually inserts herself into emotional situation. Remember how she consoles Harry after Dumbledore dies, or how she comforts her father during Christmas at Grimmauld Place. But when Fleur proves herself, Ginny says nothing, not even to Hermione, not even in private. This feels less like a character choice and more like a narrative convenience. The emotional weight of Fleur's declaration, "I am beautiful enough for both of us," should have rippled through the Weasley family, challenging their assumptions and forcing growth. And, to some extent, it does. Molly softens, Arthur seems pleased. But the character who most needed that moment, Ginny, is absent. She doesn't speak, she doesn't change, she just disappears from the conflict, as if the writer hit mute. Ultimately, it raises an uncomfortable question. Did Ginny's dislike for Fleur serve a purpose beyond cheap comedy? If so, where is the payoff? If not, why give her such a prominent role in opposing the relationship? The narrative plants a seed and then forgets to water it. For a series so rich in character arcs, this lapse feels like a narrative oversight. The result is a version of Ginny who feels incomplete. Not because she isn't brave, or witty, or loyal. She is all of those things. But because one of her most petty, unjust moments is never addressed. Her silence doesn't signal maturity, it signals avoidance. And avoidance, for Ginny Weasley, is the one trait that never fit. Number 26. Why did Ginny recover so easily after the war? Ginny Weasley stood on platform 9 3/4 with the serene glow of motherhood, watching her children vanish into the red steam of the Hogwarts Express. The image was striking. A young woman, barely out of her own turbulent teenage years, already settled, already healed, already whole. She smiled as if nothing had ever cracked her heart, as if the war hadn't stolen her brother Fred, hadn't ripped her childhood into shreds of ash and fire. For readers, this closing scene in the Deathly Hallows brought peace, but for those who look closer, it brings a question too sharp to ignore. Why did Ginny Weasley seem so untouched by the war? Why, after all the death, the fear, the trauma, did she emerge as though reborn? Not scarred, not haunted, but content. Fred's death alone should have shattered her. Ginny wasn't merely a sister who happened to lose a sibling. She was the youngest in a tight-knit family where Fred and George were the sun and moon of mischief and joy. Fred died in the bowels of the battle-scarred castle while the earth shook from curses and screams, and Ginny, 17, bloodied, raw, had to step over that pain and carry on. The world had ended, so why had the battle not ceased, the castle fallen silent in horror? Why had the Death Eaters not fled? Why had the battle raged on? This line, narrating Fred's death, painted a picture of grief so thick it threatened to swallow the living. Ron collapsed. Percy was paralyzed by grief. But Ginny? We hear nothing. We see her only briefly later, still in the fight. She never speaks about him again. After the war, her path seems pre-written by comfort. She becomes a professional Quidditch player, then a sports journalist, then a mother of 3. Her trauma, if it ever existed, is sealed away like a Horcrux. Rowling never gives us a moment where Ginny reflects on the war. There are no scenes of her breaking down, doubting herself, fearing another loss. No mention of nightmares, survivors, guilt, or healing. She is one of the very few characters who is not shown mourning, not even briefly. Contrast this with Neville Longbottom, who emerges from the war hardened but visibly shaped by it, scarred and stoic, a teacher who still bears the weight of resistance in his shoulders, or Harry, whose trauma is addressed explicitly, the boy who walks to his death, who returns to life weary and hollow-eyed, who names his son after 2 dead men who haunt him always. Ginny's absence from the recovery arc is perhaps more haunting than any battle. The girl who survived the Chamber of Secrets at 11, who spent her school years in fear of carrows and curses, should logically carry emotional scars. She led Dumbledore's army with Neville and Luna while the school became a prison. She watched students tortured, fought in the Battle of Hogwarts, and, likely, saw friends die. Colin Creevey's lifeless body was found after the battle, her classmate, her friend. Yet when the smoke clears, Ginny is simply fine, happy, unburdened. There is no journal entry, no letter, no tear-stained moment in the Great Hall after the war. She re-enters the narrative only as Harry's wife and the mother of his children. This absence of trauma raises uncomfortable questions. Is Ginny's recovery authentic, or is it simply unexplored? Was she truly resilient, or was her story quietly erased by narrative convenience? Rowling may have envisioned a future of peace, but emotional realism suffers in this depiction. Ginny's journey lacks the weight of grief, the stumbling steps of healing. Even Hermione, ever composed, reveals the deep impact of the war in the cursed child, haunted by fear of Voldemort's return and the lingering consequences of time travel. Ron, too, becomes more subdued, more anxious. The war shaped him, visibly, but Ginny remains emotionally static, untouched. Consider also Molly Weasley. She, too, lost a child, but her grief is tangible. During the battle, her scream as she duels Bellatrix Lestrange, "Not my daughter, you bitch," is both a mother's fury and a scream of unspeakable loss. She is fighting not just for survival, but against the void that Fred's death would leave. That void is never explored through Ginny. There is no scene between mother and daughter that allows them to grieve together, no silent hug, no shared memory. The silence between them after the war echoes louder than any battle cry. The most glaring silence, though, is between Ginny and Harry. In the year following Dumbledore's death, they were apart. Ginny was leading a student rebellion while Harry wandered through forests, hunted and hopeless. When they reunite, it is brief and barely emotional. There is no moment of catharsis, no deep conversation about what they endured separately. Their relationship is rekindled off-page, and by the epilogue, they are a picture-perfect family. But where is the journey between fear and trust, between trauma and intimacy? Harry struggles with the weight of those he lost. Sirius, Dobby, Remus, Tonks, Snape. Does Ginny help him heal, or is she simply the reward for his victory? It is tempting to say Ginny was simply strong, that her silence is strength, her composure resilience. But this undermines the reality of trauma. True strength lies not in silence, but in survival, with honesty. Luna Lovegood, for example, is strange but whole. She acknowledges pain and yet finds wonder. Her father betrayed the trio to save her. That betrayal lingers, but Luna doesn't hide from it. She speaks the truth, even when it hurts. Ginny, on the other hand, never speaks. Her story, once vibrant and fiery, becomes muted. The girl who once cursed Malfoy with a bat-bogey hex becomes the quiet mother on the platform, her past erased by narrative comfort. One possible explanation is that Ginny, like so many trauma survivors, buried her pain to protect her future. This is not uncommon. Many who survive war construct a life of normalcy so rigid it suffocates the past, but the books do not show us even a glimpse of this internal battle. There is no mention of a scar that aches, a memory that stings. Ginny's grief is not private, it is absent. And that absence raises the question, was her story fully told? Did Rowling, in her rush to grant Harry a happy ending, forget to let Ginny mourn? We might also consider gender expectations. Ginny becomes the ideal partner, supportive, strong, maternal. She doesn't cry, doesn't rage, doesn't doubt. She doesn't haunt Harry's recovery, she enables it. This aligns with a traditional image of the supportive wife who absorbs her pain in silence. But Ginny was never silent. She was fierce, sarcastic, defiant. To see her reduced to a backdrop of peace feels like a betrayal of her character. In earlier books, she is a firebrand. In the final chapter, she is a portrait. The truth is, Ginny Weasley deserved more, not just more lines, but more humanity. A moment at Fred's grave, a memory that makes her flinch, a night where she cannot sleep. A hesitation before letting her children board the train, knowing what Hogwarts once became. The scars we do not see are often the deepest yet, but they should still be seen. Ginny's silence may comfort readers who want a tidy ending, but it silences something real, something raw, something earned. We must ask, is Ginny's healing real, or is it a convenient illusion? Has she moved on, or has the story moved without her? In a narrative filled with ghosts, where even the dead speak from paintings and memories linger in every stone of Hogwarts, Ginny's silence feels unnatural, not peaceful, but unfinished. She fought a war, lost a brother, nearly lost Harry, and grew up in fear. And yet she smiles at the platform like none of it happened, not even a flicker of memory in her eyes. If Harry is allowed to carry the weight of his past, why is Ginny not? If the boy who lived is permitted to struggle, why is the girl who survived expected to smile? The books give her no space to cry, no room to stumble, and so the epilogue closes not with a triumphant return, but with a quiet erasure. The girl who survived becomes a woman we no longer recognize, and the war, the real war, the war that scars the soul, is never truly over. Not for those who lived it, not for those who remember, and not for Ginny Weasley, even if the pages pretend otherwise. Number 27. Why didn't Ginny become an Auror after the war? After the Battle of Hogwarts, the wizarding world stood on the edge of a new era. The ashes of Voldemort's regime still smouldered across Britain, and the Ministry of Magic was desperately in need of transformation. With a shattered Aura department, a frightened population, and scattered remnants of the dark forces, there was a call for brave, principled witches and wizards to take the reins. It was not just a moment of rebuilding, it was a moment of reckoning. In this climate, Harry Potter joined the Aura office, bringing with him not only fame, but first-hand experience in resisting evil. Hermione Granger, with her sharp intellect and moral compass, took up a seat at the ministry and worked toward overhauling deeply rooted injustices. Even Neville Longbottom, once the butt of every joke at Hogwarts, found his calling in teaching herbology and shaping the minds of the next generation. Yet among all these war veterans, carving paths that aligned with the spirit of their wartime bravery, there stood one puzzling absence: Ginny Weasley. A fighter, a rebel, a survivor, and she chose the pages of the Daily Prophet's sports section over the battlegrounds of justice. There had been little doubt about Ginny's strength during the war. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione disappeared to hunt Horcruxes, Ginny remained behind and helped form the core of Dumbledore's army, which resisted Snape's brutal regime at Hogwarts. Alongside Neville and Luna, she conducted underground sabotage, stole the Sword of Gryffindor from the headmaster's office, and faced Carrow punishment without flinching. The Battle of Hogwarts itself showed her resolve. dueling Death Eaters, protecting the castle, and standing her ground despite Molly's overprotective instincts. As Rowling wrote, Ginny fought hard beside her family, a flash of red hair in the midst of battle. This wasn't a girl content to sit safely on the sidelines. She had the makings of an aura, courage, experience, and a proven sense of justice. Why then did she walk away from the path of defending the magical world? There was a moment during the Battle of the Department of Mysteries when Ginny, only 14, broke her ankle while fighting alongside the older students. She didn't retreat. She cast spells from the floor, determined to keep fighting. This kind of resolve wasn't taught, it was innate. Kingsley Shacklebolt, who would later become Minister for Magic, had said that the new Aura office under his command would be rebuilt with those who had real battle experience. Ginny's name would have been an obvious one. Yet when the time came, she didn't apply. She didn't enroll in Aura training, nor did she seek a position in magical law. Enforcement. Instead, she quietly joined the Holyhead Harpies and started a professional Quidditch career. The question lingers not because Ginny's choice was unworthy, Quidditch demands discipline, courage, and grit, but because it seemed so far removed from the battle she had just survived. For someone who had spent her youth fighting oppression, her post-war career felt like a strange retreat. Her brothers had joined the war effort. Her boyfriend had led the resistance. Her friends had thrown themselves into reform and reconstruction. Ginny, however, slipped into the background of daily life, reporting on Quidditch scores and training schedules. Was it burnout, trauma, or simply a decision to live a life that didn't revolve around darkness? There's a passage in The Half-Blood Prince that reads, Ginny did not seem at all fazed by Harry's sudden interest. She shrugged and said, "You know, you can't keep saving the world forever. Sometimes you've got to just play Quidditch." At the time, the line came off as witty, a light-hearted jab at Harry's constant entanglement with danger. But in hindsight, it reads more like a manifesto, a declaration of Ginny's intent to live on her own terms, away from the expectations of heroism. While others sought to fix the world through confrontation, perhaps Ginny chose to heal through joy. Still, the notion that someone like Ginny Weasley, who had walked into the Forbidden Forest to steal a weapon from Snape's office, would find fulfillment in match commentaries raises eyebrows. Unlike her mother Molly, who found pride in the domestic sphere and the safety of family, Ginny had always craved adventure and independence. She was the only daughter in a family of strong-willed boys, and she had forged her own path at Hogwarts with ferocity. "She's tough, Ginny is," Fred once said. "She doesn't let anyone boss her around, not even Mum." Her presence in Dumbledore's army wasn't symbolic. She was there because she refused to be left behind. When Harry became an Auror, he stepped into the role the world had prepared for him. Savior, protector, soldier. Hermione took on the ministry because her soul could not abide injustice. But Ginny perhaps didn't want to continue being someone else's symbol. She had been possessed by Tom Riddle at 11, used as a vessel for his return. That trauma shaped her more deeply than readers often acknowledge. She had experienced evil from the inside out, lost her autonomy, and nearly died because of it. That kind of invasion changes people. Fighting against Voldemort during the war may have felt like reclaiming power, but after the dust settled, perhaps the last thing she wanted was to be surrounded by dark magic again. There is also the question of legacy. Ginny was never the chosen one, nor was she the brightest witch of her age. Her value came from instinct, spirit, and action. Maybe in her heart, she didn't want to be a career fighter in a ministry that, despite the war, had not fully shed its corruption. She had seen what the system had done, how it had failed to stop Voldemort, how it had persecuted Harry, and how it had let Death Eaters infiltrate its highest levels. In that context, trusting the ministry enough to work for it might not have appealed to her. Instead, she could influence culture in a different way. as a sports star, a public figure, a mother. It's worth noting that her career wasn't as light as it appears. Joining the Holyhead Harpies was no small feat. The team was known for its competitiveness and intensity. Ginny trained, competed, and earned her place in one of the toughest all-female teams in Britain. After retiring from professional play, she transitioned into journalism, where she became a respected sports correspondent, not a gossip columnist, not a fluff writer, but someone who shaped how the wizarding world talked about athleticism and teamwork. She didn't retreat from the world, she found a new way to engage with it. There's another angle too, the cost of continuous warfare. By age 16, Ginny had already been possessed, tortured, and hunted. Her school years were marked not by dances and exams, but by underground meetings and Carrow detentions. When peace finally came, maybe she chose Quidditch not because she lacked courage, but because she had used so much of it already. The world had taken enough from her, her innocence, her safety, her childhood. She was ready to take something back. Flying through the sky at breakneck speed wasn't escapism, it was freedom.